Hi, this is Alex Cranmer. Doing my video response for chapter 7 and 8 in Cresswell and Gooderman's educational research textbook. So the question of the week is, what do you think is more critical for producing credible research and education? Choosing the right participants/sampling strategy, or designing strong instruments for data collection, and why? In my opinion, I think that choosing the right participants and sampling strategy is more important in this case. For example, if you have a totally irrelevant sample of people to what you're trying to study, then your study is essentially useless. Instrumentation is important. Data collection is obviously very important. But I do think that you do need to figure out the population that could best answer your question, and also, the sample from within that population that you want to dig a little bit deeper into. They talk about how, of course, instrumentation is important. You want to make sure if you're doing a survey that the questions are relevant. The questions, will give you enough data to help your answer your question. And then also the chapter, I believe it was chapter 8, discusses more kind of how to encourage response rates, what to do with non-responses, how that can create bias and things like that. So instrumentation is very important, but I do think that finding your target population and then finding a good sample from that population is crucial. For example, if I'm trying to study something that may be a little bit more relevant to a high school student versus a grade school student, that obviously changes your target population right there. A population cannot just be kind of random. It needs to be specified to what you're trying to do. And when you don't have the correct population, the instrumentation is essentially useless, in my opinion. You're not really going to get the data that you're looking for. I know this question relates more to education, but I work as a coach. So my first thought was, I have to make sure that my data collection is on point and that my tests are relevant. But if I'm testing maybe, for example, a 40-yard dash with a wrestler or a volleyball player who doesn't even run 40 yards on the field, that those populations are not going to help me see, is our program working. That essentially becomes useless there. Or maybe if it's a population that does need those metrics, but maybe I'm looking at like an offensive lineman versus like a wide receiver. From there I need to look at the sample from that team, and a position group that would actually be running 40 yards or would benefit from improving that metric would be a lot more productive to look at, rather than an offensive lineman or maybe even a defensive lineman who doesn't typically need to run more than 10 or 15 yards at most. Data collection is important. Instrumentation is super important. But I think if you don't have your population and even more importantly your sample that you're trying to look at perfect, or at least relevant, then you're not going to get good data at all. So thanks for listening.